introduce to you our guest speaker, the Reverend Dr. Ptrick Harbula. And I've had the pleasure of working with his book and had some conversations with him. As you know, we are having the course, The Journey of the Soul, based on his book, being taught by Carol Merlot, coming up in February, for which he is going to make a lovely appearance during that course. So we thought you might like to have a little taste of who he is and what he's doing. Reverend Dr. Ptrick Harbula has been a minister, spiritual leader, counselor, and coach for over 35 years, reaches hundreds of thousands with his writing, personal and media experiences. Ptrick is the author of The Magic of the Soul, Applying Spiritual Power to Daily Living, which is a fantastic book. It's being used as part of this core curriculum that we are teaching. And his new book, Meditation, The Simple and Practical Way. He is founder of the Living Purpose Institute and creator of the Life Coaching Certification Program and the Primal Fire Intensive. And I saw some information on the table over there where you can pick up both of his books. He was ordained as an independent religious science minister by the late Dr. Earl Barnum in 1985 and affiliated with CSL in 2010. He is also ordained and recognized as a Doctor of Divinity through Spiritual Unity Movement, of which he was the president for 12 years. He trained in spiritual psychology under the late Dr. Vivian King. He founded Meditation Magazine in 1985. It's not like he's been busy or anything. He was formerly a director of Sage Publications, a fabulous world-renowned social science publisher. Ptrick is also available after our time together here to sign books. And for those of you who are online, you can hopefully get them through an affiliate link. Otherwise, you can certainly buy them on Amazon. And today, after the workshop, after our celebration and the lunch, of course, he'll be doing a workshop, which you'll hear about in a little bit. But come on up here, Dr. Ptrick. He's going to be speaking on non-attachment, non-attachment, the secret to meditation and inner peace. Please welcome Reverend Dr. Ptrick Harbula.
How about these guys? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, all right. This place is magical. So glad. Yes, I need the clicker. It works. So, this place is magical. It's been about 12 years, I think, since I've been here. So glad to be back. I'm going to start out with a little story today. I don't usually start out with a story like this, but I just feel really inspired. Because there's so much energy in here, so much love, so much joy. Love, look at this, it's everywhere. All right, so there's these three guys out for a nice Sunday afternoon of golf. And first guy comes up, and you probably heard about this guy. His name is Moses. So Moses comes up, and he's really focused on his golf game. He's been concentrating. So he comes up and he's really taking it seriously, really concentrating, taking a couple very measured practice swings, and finally he lets it go, goes flying out over the fairway, and it's going to land though before the trap, this huge lake. And so Moses just walks out calmly, raises his club, the waters part, the ball rolls through, onto the green about 20 feet from the cup. Next guy comes up, probably heard of this guy too, his name is Jesus. So Jesus comes up, and he's also very, very, very intense about his golf game, and he's taken some practice. So he wants to do better than Moses. So he lets it go. It's flying out further than Moses' ball, but it's going to land right in that lake. So he just steps out calmly, raises his hand, and the ball just stops 6 inches from the surface and just hovers there. And he calmly walks out upon the lake, taps the ball onto the green about 10 feet from the cup. Third guy comes up, not going to tell you his name. So the third guy comes up, and he's the opposite. He's just laughing and joking and having a good time and not even taking it seriously. He takes a one-handed swipe at the ball and it goes slicing way off over. It bounces off the roof of this caddy shack, and it's over the fence onto this freeway. It's bouncing back and forth between cars. It hits a semi and bounces back over the fence, onto the caddy shack, down the roof to the rain gutter, down the rain gutter to the drain pipe, down the drain pipe to the fairway. It's rolling toward that same lake. It bounces off a rock. It lands on a lily pad. A frog grabs it in its mouth. Just then, an eagle swoops down and snatches up the frog. The frog screams out of fright. The ball drops out of his mouth, down into the cup. And Moses turns to Jesus and says, "God, I hate playing with your dad." The moral of the story is, whoever shows up with the most joy and freedom and love in their hearts gets the best results every time. That's what I'm going to talk about today. So, and boy, this place is filled with love. I mean, everything from that amazing, give her some more love, Kit. I got to hear her while she was rehearsing, and I loved it just as much then as, God, it was amazing. And to one of the most respected ministers in our entire movement, Reverend Ptrick, who, by the way, I caught crying over here during the music because her heart is so open. Don't you love that? And there's more music in your service than any center I've ever been to. What does that tell you? So the Buddha said, Siddhartha, there we go, Gautama, a few years ago, that non-attachment is the philosophy of my life, right? And in our teaching, I'll give you my quote too. Here's a quote from my book. The most powerful consciousness for manifestation is having clear intention and at the same time non-attachment to how, when, or even if it occurs, right? So our teaching tends to emphasize the clear intention of things, right? And we talk about non-attachment in different ways. It's all God, it's all good, right? That song was about turning it over, right? That's about surrender, non-attachment. But as human beings, we tend to be attached to results, but here's what Thich Nhat Hanh said, rest in peace. Letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free. You can feel that, right? So, what do you think is a more productive consciousness for manifesting what we want, right? Anxiety or freedom? Rhetorical question. So here's what happens when we have attachment to things on the outside. So if I have attachments to financial things, to relationship, to what's going on in the world, if there's attachment and therefore worry, then two things are happening. One is I'm actually sending negative energy into all these things, holding them in place, right? But another thing that you can happen from this frazzled guy is that all of his energy, all of his power is going outward to these things, right? So the opposite of that is when someone is centered, right? Then their energy is completely and totally available to manifest what we want. So this is what it looks like when, oh, how'd that slide get in there? Actually, that's me down at the Venice Boardwalk. This is what it looks like when we are non-attached and therefore centered in our energy, that aura, our energy is fully present. So then when we want something, it becomes very easy, right? Because if I'm doing a spiritual mind treatment and I've got attachment to that car or more money or my soulmate coming in, then again, I'm going to be worried if it doesn't happen, right? And so I'm putting negative energy into it. When I am non-attached, then I don't even have to do a really involved spiritual mind treatment. In fact, my favorite phrase that came to me as an affirmation several years ago is, wouldn't it be fun if? Wouldn't it be fun? Because you feel that sets the intention, creates an image of what we want, but there's no attachment to it, or at least relatively no attachment. And I started playing with this. I started several years ago. I was doing a tour, and I decided to play with that affirmation. And speaking from the pulpit, I said, "Wouldn't it be fun if 35 people showed up for the workshop in the afternoon?" And 3 times in a row, exactly 35 people showed up. In fact, in Calgary, as people were coming in the door, people started counting. And when it got to 35, everybody clapped, and no one else came. So I stopped saying that. I did today, but I stopped saying that because I didn't want to limit it to 35 anymore. It's going to be magical no matter how many people show up, whether it's one or if it's everybody in the building, right? So let's see, what's coming up next here? I don't argue with reality because I'm a spiritual person, from Byron Katie. I don't argue with reality because it hurts. And I'll add, I never once win the argument, right? So, so manifestation becomes simple and effortless when we're at least relatively non-attached. Completely non-attached would be an ideal. And it's not about getting to the ideal. It's just about moving toward it, right? And it's a practice, getting better and better at it. I love this quote from Pam Grout. Oh, that reminds me. I want to tell you a story about Pam Grout. So I was teaching a class at Center for Spiritual Living, Simi Valley, and I was reading a book by Pam Grout called E Squared. Any fans? Anyone read that book? And in the book, the first experiment in the book is having an intention that something miraculous is going to happen in the next 24 hours. And it's kind of different. Usually we don't put a timeline on it. That's a little different, spin on it. Is within 24 hours, a miracle that is so big is going to happen that I will know it was a result of this intention, right? So, and the interesting thing was I didn't quite buy into the 24-hour thing because I've always been taught, you just let it go and see what happens, right? There's no time in God's time. But anyway, so it didn't happen in 24 hours because I didn't believe it. So it happened in 48 hours. I was teaching the class, and the first couple times, it was done on a donation basis, which is how I like to do things. And the first couple classes, we had right about $200 in the basket afterwards. And there were, I think, about 20 people in the class, so about $10 a person, right? So the third class, 48 hours from when I had that intention, there was over $2,000 in the basket, right? And so I had to know it came from that intention, right? But here's what I knew. I knew that if this had happened 10 years earlier, I would have been attached to that intention happening, right? And so I would have been putting negative energy into it not happening. And so I know that I would not have gotten that result. It was the combination of having the intention and also not caring. It is so fascinating to me. The less we care, the easier it is. The people we're staying with, Daniel and Gloria, amazing couple. And both of them were telling me last night they had just decided, I'm perfectly fine. If I never find a mate in the rest of this life, I'm going to be perfectly fine on my own. And guess what? They found each other. And they are just, I said this last night, I think the most amazing people that we've ever stayed with, and we get put up all the time when we're traveling around. Thank you, you guys. You're just so amazing. And O.C. Smith, was that his name in the video? He said it too, that the searching is inside, not outside, right? So if I'm doing a spiritual mind treatment and I'm attached, and how many people, it's very subtle too, right? Because when people come to practitioners and they say, I really, really want to heal this condition I have, right? As a practitioner, I might even get attached to them having that result, right? But my take on the teaching, and I think, I'll bet you Peter would agree with me, and I think the people who really understand this teaching, it's not about the manifestation on the outside. It's about the shift that happens inside when we pray. Because when I have the consciousness for something, and then I just let go, and the manifestation takes care of itself. I don't have to do anything, right? So this is one of my favorite quotes of all time from Pam Grout, E cubed. Once you can say, and this is an ideal, and again, we're just getting closer and closer to this, but once you can say, this is the best thing to happen to me about everything that happens in your life, you'll be aligned with the FP, field of potential. You align with the FP by loving everyone, by seeing the face of God in everything, by feeling happy, by being joyful and grateful for everything, no matter what. Instead of letting the apparent reality dictate your feelings, you line up with the FP, which knows nothing but love, peace, and perfect contentment. Being joyful and grateful for everything, no matter what. As human beings, we tend to let the world of form inform how we feel inside, right? If things are going well, we're happy. Things are great. If things aren't going well, then there's tension, there's anxiety, right? And so we're human beings on this wonderful human journey. And so it's about just practicing this, getting better and better at letting go and letting God. Just turning it over, right? I don't usually put this slide up when I'm traveling. At Simi Valley Center, my home base, I'll put this up, and everyone knows me, so they know I'm not serious about this, but this is my favorite spiritual guru, Swami Harbula Nanda. True non-attachment isn't Photoshop amazing. True non-attachment, that's actually not my body, but it kind of looks like me. True non-attachment is realizing that fundamentally we are attached, using the word in a different way, to everything. We are one. If we are attached to something outside ourselves, that's an affirmation that we are separate. We cannot be at peace and separate at the same time. Right? What has occurred to me over, it's part of what the magic of the soul is all about, is looking for the magic in every experience, seeing our lives through the eyes of our soul rather than the eyes of our personality solely, right? Solely through the soul. And so the only way to arrive at lasting inner peace is to be non-attached, like the Buddha said so many years ago. It's the only way to freedom. And the interesting thing is that the more free we are, the more power we have to create and live the life that we want to live. So let me tell you a little bit about the play. I don't want to leave that slide up there. Let's go with Byron Katie. So the play shop today, and I call it a play shop because we're not going to do work, we're going to play, is a couple things that we do. At the very beginning of the workshop, I'm going to share the most important practice that I share with people in my life coaching, my spiritual life coaching practice. And it's called pivoting. You might have heard it from the Hicks material, the Abraham Hicks material. And basically, it is a way to instantly shift from a negative mindset to a positive mindset. And there's a measurement system that I've created to actually measure our consciousness. And I have seen absolute miracles happen for people within 30 days as a result of practicing this. And you might even think, I'll explain it more in the play shop, but you might think there's a dichotomy there. Well, if we're pivoting to what we want and really focusing on that, is that non-attachment. But what I find is in this measurement system, getting above 50% focused on what we want, when we get above 50%, we no longer worry, and therefore we're less attached, if that makes sense. And then we're going to talk about, everyone's going to create a vision for their most joyful life. And we're going to tell some jokes. And then, and the thing that we emphasize the most is that doing what brings us joy consistently, and having that become the compass for our life, is the key to everything. So, if you don't have plans, come to the play shop, because you're going to really be glad you did. If you do have plans, change them. If you absolutely can't change them, sign them up on my mailing list. Next time around, then we'll give you notice. So let's see, what else did I want to say before we're done here? So anyone see the movie My Favorite Exotic Marigold Hotel? Okay, so in it, real quick synopsis, this young guy in India is marketing this big kind of castle, this property, as a retirement home for people in England. And so these people get there, and they say, you airbrush the brochure, because the place looked beautiful on the brochure, but it's all dilapidated and falling apart. So the guests are coming up to him, and they're like complaining about this is broken, that's broken. And his famous saying was this. We have a famous saying in India that everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not yet the end. Right? So I'll tell you a little story about my teacher, Vivian King, who was mentioned in my introduction. Amazing saint of a woman, powerful woman, who taught us about non-attachment. She taught us that we are more than our body or sensations, more than our feelings, more than our mind. We are pure spirit, right? It's completely synonymous with science of mind. So after I graduated her 4-year program, I was at a New Year's Eve party, and somebody said, "Did you hear what happened to Vivian?" And I said, "No." She was hit by a drunk driver driving through Texas, by the way. And she was hospitalized in a coma for 6 weeks. Her head had swollen the size of a basketball. She became a quadriplegic and lost the use of her voice as well. It was brainstem damage. And so she had just been moved to Long Beach. I live in Southern California. And so I went to visit her that next weekend, and her head was no longer the size of a basketball, but her face was very contorted, but she still had this impish grin that she always had. And they were deciding where to move her for her rehabilitation. And it was either going to be Orange County, which was a long ways away from here, or it was going to be San Fernando Valley, which was where I live. So I said, hey, if she comes to the San Fernando Valley, then I can come and visit her a lot more. And she had friends in Orange County too. And they didn't know where I lived, but the next week she ended up 2 weeks from where I lived, two blocks from where I lived. And so I got to go and spend time with her and help with her physical therapy and do spiritual mind treatment and energy healing and all kinds of things. Might sound like I was doing a lot for her, but it was the other way around. I was getting so much for her. She was such an inspiration to all of her caretakers because she didn't think she was sick. She had a mechanical arm, for an example, that would feed her, right? Because she didn't want to be dependent on other people. And she would be feeding herself and getting food all over her face and all over her apron. And as I say that, you might think, wow, if that was me, that would be difficult. I might be embarrassed. She'd be smiling or laughing the entire time because she saw it as a cosmic joke. She knew she was more than her body and her feelings and her mind. She knew who she was, right? So she decided to leave the planet a couple of years later. But about a year before she did, she said to me, she could speak in whispers and she had an amplifier that, and you couldn't understand her unless you talked with her a lot. But she said, I am a teacher who can no longer speak. I'm a writer who can no longer write, wrote several amazing books. She said, but as long as I have a physical body, I can remain a presence of peace and love and joy in this world. So there are times when I have challenges in my life. We all have challenges in our life, right? And I think of Vivian and think, wow, if she could be remaining a presence of peace and joy and love in that condition, you know, I can get through this cold or COVID or whatever the heck it is, right? Or my sore knee that I'm having surgery on in a few weeks, whatever it might be. But the most important thing I want to leave you with is love. You know, it's right here. The word love has been spoken or sung at least 50 times already this morning. That's what this center is about, I'm getting. And so even when I can't be non-attached because something's really hard in my life, just love myself right where I am, right? And that will lead me ultimately to non-attachment. Because when I fill up with love, it just overflows and it changes everything, right? So in the most important expression of self-love, of love then, is self-love. This phrasing came to me. I was talking to a client a couple years ago, and we were talking about self-love. And this is the phrasing that came to me, is that when I love myself unconditionally, what I realize is that I am not myself. I am in fact the self. I am in fact pure love. And so are you, and I love you. Thank you for having me.